Good morning. Good morning. We're going to give it a minute to let everybody chime in. Just thank you for joining us. We're excited today. Very special guest. Good morning. Senate President and Councilman, you didn't know I could sing as well. You didn't know that came with it. I know.
Yeah. Not only do we not, but totally expected, you know.
Okay.
Is there anything that Shelonda Stokes cannot do is the real question of the day.
That is the essence of today's show. No, just kidding, everybody. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Downtown Download. I'm Downtown Partnership President Shelonda Stokes, joined as always, I don't know if you call you my COVID community partner, whatever, Baltimore Councilman Eric Costello. And also our city is lucky to have an amazing delegation to the Maryland General Assembly that's led by our guest this morning, Senate President Bill Ferguson. So he's a tremendous partner for all of his constituents and has been behind some very big wins for our downtown neighborhoods lately. So I'm looking forward to talking with him about that and so much more. First, please give me a few minutes, as you always do, to fill you in about the latest happening at Downtown Partnership. I am happy to announce our outdoor event season resumes starting this Saturday with socially distanced fitness. And so we have Queen D of Bodywork. She'll be joined by DJ Mook to power you through a workout in our beautiful Center Plaza. If you've ever taken a Queen D class, I know you will be there. If you've never taken a Queen D class, please come. This is life-changing. The classes are only $5 and you will need to register. You can do that on our website. I also want you to mark your calendars for the return of our socially distant Pratt Street Market. And so that runs from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. every Thursday starting May 6th. And so we have an expanding roster of vendors, including favorites like DMV Empanadas, Bartenfelder Farm, So Beachy, and Dizzy Cow Pizza. And starting on June 3rd, Ikiban will be back with their tofu bra and neighborhood bird. So please, please, please come join us each week on the corner of Charles and Pratt Street. Almost done. I'm so excited about these things and us connecting again in just a few weeks, starting on May 22nd. And Councilman, we have to give you major kudos for this and helping us bring back the Charles Street Promenade. And this is where we close 14 blocks on Charles Street to cars from Saratoga to North Avenue. So you'll be able to bike, stroll, or scoot through the city's most beautiful and historic neighborhoods, dining outdoors and supporting so many of the shops and cultural institutions that line this route. And so we know it was incredibly popular last year when we did it. It was so much fun that we wanted to make sure we could do that again. And so thank you to the mayor's office for allowing this to happen in here. As we said, all of these are COVID safe, they're outdoors. And so one more thing, and this is a drum roll, you know, do all of that. I'm pleased to announce the dates for the Baltimore Summer Restaurant Week. And so Downtown Partnership and Visit Baltimore teaming up again to bring you the tastiest week of this summer. It starts on Friday, July 23rd and runs for 10 days through Sunday, August 1st. And so restaurant startups coming back to us, all good news there. So Restaurant Week and all of these events, as I mentioned, will follow COVID protocols. Exact details of how things will evolve will be on our website. Please tune in. And I look forward to seeing you this Saturday at Bodywork. So please go on our website for all of that. So Councilman, I think that's all I have. Do you have any updates you want to share as well?
Thanks, Shelonda. Just a couple quick updates. One, want to remind everyone to continue to go out and get your vaccines. Special shout out to a Downtown Partnership member, University of Maryland Medical Center. They've been doing incredible work. As I know many of our other healthcare institutions in the city have in terms of distributing vaccinations. They've had a bit of a focus on the downtown area in West Baltimore. So really appreciate all the support that they've provided, but please make sure you go out there and get your vaccine. They are widely accessible at this point. If anyone has any questions, I'll punch my contact info into the chat. Second, there's been a number of questions about special events. At this time, the city is not issuing permits for special events as the COVID numbers are not supportive of that change at this time. But please continue to stay tuned. Hopefully things are going to continue to turn in the right direction, and we will see special events back soon enough. And lastly, the budget process is coming up for Baltimore City. We will have Baltimore City Council Taxpayers Night on May 27th, and then we will start to have hearings on June 2nd. So I want to encourage everyone to provide your feedback on the budget proposal that's been submitted by Mayor Scott. I will say in short, I think in light of everything that's happened in terms of significant state and federal support, much of which our senator is going to talk with us about today, along with decreased projections related to COVID, I think Mayor Scott's presented a very responsible budget. So looking forward to participating in that process. And lastly, Shelonda, I just want to thank you and the team at Downtown Partnership. I can't tell you how excited I am about the Charles Street Promenade again. It was an incredible time last fall, and just looking forward to continuing to working with Downtown Partnership to make that more of the norm as opposed to the exception. Back to you, Shelonda.
No, thank you so much. I know we could not have done it without you. So all love all around. And just as people may say, the Charles Street Promenade and all of these things are not deemed events as such, public restrooms and all of those other things. When we close down Charles Street, it's really for the restaurants and shops that are along that line to just open their doors and have a stroll in those places. So just want to make sure I'm clarifying. I don't want anybody to say in the chat, but you said you're having an event that isn't in that way. So thank you for that. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Senate President Bill Ferguson. I could probably do this without any notes at all, but I do want to make sure I get in your amazing talking points that are in there. We know that you represent downtown in the 46th district, along with House Speaker Jones and Governor Hogan. We know that you orchestrate so many productive elements during this legislative session. And we know that in spite of COVID, because we know that that has an impact, you guys had unusual protocols and you did it anyway. And so we thank you for that time. Outside of the session, we know that President Ferguson has been incredibly responsive to your constituent base, of which we are a part of that. You heard the community, he heard the community concerns about temporarily replacing the condemned Bard Building with a surface parking lot. And we appreciate you, Senate President, for going to work with Governor Hogan to find money to turn that lot into hopefully a park instead of parking. And we know just last week, I was able to join you at a press conference with Governor Hogan, Lieutenant Governor Rutherford, Secretary Churchill, and others to really commit to announce the state's commitment to moving more than 3,000 jobs from the aging State Center complex into the heart of the Central Business District. I cannot thank you enough for that. And I know, as humble as you are, we know that you did a lot to move mountains there, and appreciate your conversations with the governor on that. So if you joined us for the state, the state of downtown release, the office vacancy rate has been far too high, and this effort really goes to help bridge that gap. It is a spark that we needed in there. So in addition to helping the business community, President Ferguson is a strong advocate for closing the digital divide, increasing social equity, and helping Marylanders recover financially from the COVID economic crisis. There's so many more things that I could say. He answers the phone when you call, no matter who you are a true champion. I thank you and welcome you to the show this morning. Councilman, please take it away with the questions. I do want to say to our audience, please put your questions in the Q&A box. We will get to those. We have a set of questions that were sent in and prepared early. After Councilman Costello gets through those, I will go to the questions that are in the Q&A box. So please continue to put them in as they come to you. Councilman, I'm turning it over to you.
Thanks so much, Shelonda. Mr. President, thank you so much for being here with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you all.
So you've come off a legislative session like no other. By all accounts, you and House of Delegates Speaker Adrian Jones did a tremendous job establishing COVID protocols that allowed our state leaders to focus on legislating in a safe way. What was the experience like from a COVID perspective of being down in Annapolis? And are there any lessons that local businesses can apply as they start to bring back teleworking employees, or as retail starts to open and invite customers back in?
Well, thank you, Councilman. Thank you, Shelonda. It is always a pleasure to start any morning with the two of you all. So I am so pleased to be here. But it is even better when it is a post-session gathering because this was without a doubt the hardest and most challenging and most physically, emotionally difficult session I ever could have imagined. And it makes sense in a once in 100-year pandemic, trying to do the work of convening the people to write laws at a time where public health pretty much recommends everything against that. It was a pretty extraordinary year. And so, I will say that probably the single, something I will never, ever forget amongst the many things is waking up on Tuesday, April 13th, which was the day after Sine Die, the last day where we had gotten through all 90 days. And just thinking to myself, I don't have to worry about somebody testing positive and there being an outbreak on campus somewhere. And I will say, I did not realize until that day after just how much I was sort of holding on to this responsibility of people getting sick. We've seen the tragic results of what COVID can do. And it was in every single day, every minute, every hour, vigilance of making sure that our precautions were in place that I think let us get through it. I think if you think back, at the beginning of January, and, I was confident we could. I thought there may be some, if we had to deal with an issue, we may have to extend the session, we may have to pause for a few weeks and then come back. But I was confident that we had done the work to get the precautions in place. But I think the real story, and I think a lesson to be learned, is that if you thoughtfully prepare and you are vigilant about upholding those precautions on an everyday basis, you can prevent this virus. And I think we had not a single in 90 days where we had people coming and traveling from across the state to the legislature who were, some going home every day, some staying down. Masks were required. I think our single most important aspect was the testing component. We were tested every Tuesday and every Friday. So we were able to catch things early. We did have positive cases, none that happened on campus, but ones that were caught, we were able to isolate, quarantine those individuals, and it never spread. So, if you follow the rules, if you are vigilant, we can have an impact on this virus. It is not impossible. And so I think that's the biggest lesson to be taken out of this from my perspective. We all have jobs to do. And so this is an extraordinary time. I think all of us are wanting to get back to something. I wouldn't say back to normal because I think that's an impossible place to be, and we shouldn't be achieving that or aiming for that. But we can function in this environment if we do it responsibly.
Thanks, Senator. This session all around has universally been hailed as a success. Governor Hogan has said it was the most productive session in his 7-year tenure in Annapolis. Obviously, the pandemic is an urgent crisis and was really priority number one this year for several reasons. But most urgently, there's the public health crisis that we're dealing with, the need for people to get tested and subsequently vaccinated. Then there's the economic crisis facing Maryland families and businesses. So we're going to get into some of the specifics about the legislation in just a second. But generally, how would you grade this session in terms of responding to COVID-19?
I may be a little bit biased, but I would give it an A+++. Is that on the scale? No. Look, I am really proud of what we were able to get done. I think that this was a truly extraordinary moment. I am privileged and blessed to be able to work with some unbelievably talented colleagues, people who did not stop working for the entire last year, assessing the problems, trying to help where they could, but walked into session knowing that we had some core priorities to take care of. We said that we were going to focus on 4 major things. One was getting relief to the most vulnerable individuals in our communities as quickly as possible. 2 was to pass a balanced budget and set us up for a successful post-pandemic world. 3 was to do a very real, substantive, and transformative package around police reform to enhance trust, accountability, and transparency. And 4 was to ensure that we took the lessons that we learned from this pandemic that were inclusive of health issues, but that were much broader than just the health impact of this pandemic, and provide a more equitable and inclusive future. Those were the 4 objectives of what we said we were going to do and that we had to do after spending the entire year assessing just how deep and painful this crisis was. We knew what we had to do when we got there. Within the first 3 weeks, we passed $1.5 billion stimulus bill that gave tax credits to small businesses to be able to hold their funds, provided significant resources for the social safety net. Think about individuals who are being dropped from roles who are on temporary disability assistance. Think about food bank pantries, individual seniors who are stuck at their homes, those who are facing eviction, making sure that they had emergency housing. All of these most important, most inequitably hit industries and individuals, we had to get money out the door as quickly as humanly possible. And we did it. And we did it with collaboration and negotiation. The speaker and I, our two chambers, worked very closely with the governor from the get-go. And we passed a landmark piece of support legislation. The one other thing I would add is that as part of that, we did the single largest expansion of our best anti-poverty tool that exists in our toolbox, which is the Earned Income Tax Credit. And whenever anybody talks about the Earned Income Tax Credit, there's always this sort of like wonkiness eye glaze over, because it's one of these things that like just sounds very technical. What it does is it rewards work. It says, if you are a working family, if you have kids, if you are trying to put food on the table for your family and you are going to work and you are earning money, you should keep more of that money. And so we did the largest expansion of that program in the history of the state of Maryland for the next 3 years. That includes residents, all residents. So individuals who are here legally or who are undocumented. It is the largest expansion we've ever had, because what we've seen from this pandemic is that so many of our most vulnerable communities were the ones who got hit the hardest, and they needed support more than anyone. And we were able to get that done. We also passed a budget, which I'll gladly get into later, that I believe sets us up for success more now than we've ever been. We erased the structural deficit. We've erased the structural deficit for the next 2 years. That's something that has not existed for the last 22 years. Thank you to the Biden administration, to the US Congress, to our Maryland delegation for helping get additional support dollars from the federal government to the states. But the bottom line is we left the state in a better financial footing than any of us could have ever imagined. And I think we put it in priority areas. The budget passed unanimously. Again, we worked collaboratively to solve problems. Our police reform package was without a doubt the hardest issue I've ever worked on. No questions asked. It was the most difficult and emotionally challenging policy package. And it makes sense. I do believe that this is part of the pandemic as well. What we saw this summer, what we experienced, that's not unique to here in the city, but I think was certainly acute this summer after some of the national incidents. But of course, we've had, sadly, enough incidents here in the state of Maryland and in the city, is that we just had we have a fundamentally broken trust equation where communities that are served by law enforcement do not feel that trust and accountability. What we've seen, again, acutely here in the city is that when we are in a situation where individuals do not trust the traditional criminal justice system or law enforcement, they don't come forward. They don't resolve disputes through the traditional normal means. If 90% of cases are solved because of eyewitnesses, and you have cases that do not have any eyewitnesses because people are afraid to come forward because they don't think the criminal justice system works for them, you will never address crime. We can talk about enhanced penalties. We can talk about all this stuff. But if you don't have arrests, convictions, and actual targeting and justice for those who are victims, but also those who are repeat violent offenders, you will never solve this problem. And so that's why enhancing trust and accountability ensures better public safety for everyone. I fundamentally believe that through this session, we put forward and finished with a package that will move us down this long road of recovery of that trust, accountability, and transparency. Finally, around inclusive growth, what we saw was this very, very, very inequitable impact. We saw communities of color get hit by this virus, that we knew these gaps existed, but they were just simply exacerbated and turned into canyons. And that is what we cannot allow to be our reality in the years ahead. We can't fix this overnight. It is hundreds and decades of years of systems, of structures, of perceptions, of you name it, that have built us to this moment. But what we have to do, in my opinion, and what I think the General Assembly moved forward this year is identify the problems. We have to measure the problems, and we have to measure the solutions to make sure that what we're trying to do to improve the situation is actually working, not just because we think it will work. And so on areas around environmental injustice, on areas of health disparities, looking at intergenerational wealth creation, we moved a series of bills that will ideally start moving the needle consistently and in an evidence-based way to help close those gaps that have been just so proven to exist during this pandemic. So that's the headline. I mean, we said what we were going to do. We worked hard to move through it, and we got it done. And so I feel very strongly that we met the moment.
Senator, it sounds like you guys had a pretty laid back, relaxing session these past 90 days.
It was a cakewalk, you know. No,
no, it sounds like you guys had a lot on your plate. I know you touched on some of this, with respect to the ITC. Right out of the gate, the General Assembly passed the Governor's Relief Act, along with the work that you and Speaker Jones did on the General Assembly's Recovery Now package, which you played a major part in helping to craft. Can you get into a little more detail about how these programs are helping Maryland's economy recover and rebuild stronger?
Certainly. And actually what I will drop in a link here. So the governor put forward the Relief Act very early on. We knew that it was coming. And I think it's important to note Maryland's legislative and legal structure, our constitutional government, provides the governor with an enormous amount of authority, especially during a time of emergency. And so it was not absolutely necessary that the governor work with the legislature in order to do a number of these different programs. But early coming into session, we had a number of conversations that now was the time that we didn't want the partisanship, the bickering, the sort of political fights. We needed to solve problems. We didn't have to, identify them as Republican problems or Democratic problems or Republican solutions or Democratic solutions. We just needed to solve Maryland problems. And so the governor worked very, very closely, talking from the beginning with us about what our priorities were, introduced the bill. We made it clear that we would be moving it forward and using that as a vehicle. We added what we called the Recovery Now Amendment, which was about a $600 million identified package, really targeting those industries that were hit the hardest. And, downtown certainly has felt the burden of that. Your hospitality industries, your restaurants, the lodging, anything that had to do with the service-based economy, your entertainment venues. So we put about roughly $200 million into this package to really target those small businesses. And then the additional $400 million was targeted around the individuals or entities that help those who are most vulnerable: homeless services, juvenile education, the emergency sheltering, food banks and food pantries, the Meals on Wheels, the things that were getting resources that sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs of home, shelter, safety, security. We really wanted to put dollars into the hands of those who needed it most. The other place that I think was really an important investment at that point was focusing in on those who were stuck in the unemployment purgatory. The unemployment system was absolutely crushed at the beginning of this, and sadly is still not at a place where I think any of us would like it to be. But you had people that were sitting in kind of we called it adjudication purgatory, where they were just stuck. They couldn't get a yes, they couldn't get a no, they didn't know what documents they needed. But think about that, for 3 months, you sit there waiting for a check, waiting for some determination. You're not at your job, not because of something you did, but because of a pandemic. Your bank account's getting lower and lower and lower. You're trying to put food on the table. So what we did was we said that anybody that had been waiting for 30 days or more was sent $1,000 check to help them tide over, so that in the time that their case was getting adjudicated, they would have some basic resources to pay rent, to put food on the table for their kids. And so that was done very quickly. It was out the door by roughly about mid-February, mid to late February. And that's what I think Marylanders were expecting, was that we would go in there and get the job done. So there is a website up that's the Maryland Relief and Recovery Fund. It's just where all these dollars went. And I'll send along a link that you can see for those who may be interested, what they can apply towards, where those funds, what has been expended thus far, what may still be available. And so, I want to commend the administration for being very efficient and quick to move this money into the hands of people that needed it.
Oh, thank you, Senator. And I want to thank you and members of Team 46, another one of our board members, Delegate Learman, Senator Hayes, who were instrumental in helping. We got a number of complaints from folks about the unemployment insurance system. So your folks' offices were just incredible in helping our constituents to navigate those. So thank you.
Yep. No, thank you. There was a historic influx of people. Hopefully we never ever see this again, but certainly I think we have learned a lot of lessons, and we passed some legislation that helps us prepare ideally for the next thing. It may not be a pandemic, but whatever the next thing may be, I think we'll be better suited in future years.
So Senator, you talked a little bit about police reform, and that was a major topic throughout the country this past year, as a lot of state legislatures across the nation were dealing with that. In addition, the General Assembly tackled other equity-related issues, specifically funding for our 4 state HBCU institutions. How would you grade the session on dealing with these issues of racial and social equity, as well as others?
This was without a doubt an absolutely essential priority for us and for the House, for the Senate and the House together. Again, this is part of the pandemic story, and I think it's really important to think about this, because we're not just seeing it on the health outcomes of how the virus impacted. Look at vaccine distribution today. Despite and I do want to say, much improved distribution of the vaccine program, we still have significant gaps in who has received the vaccine. And I think there are a lot of complex factors for why that is. I think early on, we heard more about vaccine hesitancy. I think there is no doubt a piece of that, but that is not the driving factor of the inequitable distribution of the vaccine. I think there are a lot of the same issues that we are dealing with in society overall that are just sort of replicated and modeled in the data about the vaccine distribution. Lack of access to transportation to get to the vaccine. Lack of technology access to be able to know how to sign up or know where to sign up. A different network of communications that doesn't rely on the same network that we traditionally use to access other communities. And so for all of these reasons, these are a symptom of a broader problem, and they have replicated themselves over and over and over throughout this pandemic in different facets. And so there's no one thing that will fix that. And I think it's really, really important to say these issues are deeply, deeply complex. But what we have to do is identify the problem, measure it, and then measure the solutions and assess whether or not they're working. So from a number of different areas, I would say probably the one that I'm most excited about, and Senator Antonio Hayes was just an unbelievable champion for this. Also, our President Pro Tem Melanie Griffith, who has helped shepherd this work group that I asked her to put together around equity and inclusion. And we had a number of pieces of legislation, but we have re-energized and recreated these health enterprise zones. This area, this concept where just somebody's zip code, we know that if you live in this zip code versus another zip code, your life, your health outcomes are objectively going to be lower. And what we know works is this real deep community engagement where you really work with community partners to do that sort of preventative health awareness, to make sure that somebody's going to their follow-up appointments, to have this public health core that can be out there talking to people one-on-one on their doorstep. This is a program that we saw pilot success. Senator Hayes was out front probably within the very first few weeks of this pandemic, talking about the need to reinvigorate and invest in these health enterprise zones to deal with health disparities that are very real and true. And so in the Recovery Act bill, we added $14 million to make sure that not only do we restart this program, that we provide sustainable funding. And I just feel like this is one of the probably most exciting structural aspects of this policy package around inequity that I think will have an enormous impact moving forward. But we did a number of other issues. I mean, when we think about with wealth creation, we know that in Maryland we have a huge unbanked community. They don't deposit their checks into a bank. Too often, it's much easier to go to the check cashing store down the road and get several interest points taken out of the check every single week, and not build up that financial credit that's so necessary to create wealth. And so we passed a number of pieces of legislation to really deal with the banking desert crisis that exists here in Maryland. We've seen progress down in Cherry Hill. Chase Bank and JP Morgan Chase has opened up a new branch, the first time that there's been a bank in Cherry Hill in the neighborhood's entire history, which is a remarkable fact, but at least now it's there, and we're going to see some progress. And then, of course, on the health front as well, I just so deeply believe the earlier we act, the better we all will be. It's why I so passionately care about education, because I think that is the best antidote to any particular issue. You name it, if we do better at educating and giving real opportunities, but also if we start earlier when babies and prenatal. So we made some pretty significant investments in prenatal and helping mothers to be healthier for on-time birth and delivery, to make sure that they're healthy when they give birth, that they have the support they need in those very, very challenging weeks afterwards. And so across the board, we passed it was probably 14 to 16 different bills that were very targeted and purposeful about these kind of core ways of shifting the paradigm moving forward. We'll be assessing them, and this is going to be ongoing work.
Thank you, Senator. Shelonda, I just realized, I think we're on our 29th or 30th episode, but I think we've come circle. I think the Senator, Bill was our first guest.
I was wondering that. I thought I had done it. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and one of our other first guests, big shout out to our other senator who represents downtown, Senator Antonio Hayes. I know that Senator Hayes is going to be joining us for an upcoming episode. So great to have him with us today as well.
Well, can I just say, actually, Councilman, really quickly, and I didn't know Senator Hayes would be here, but I'm glad that he is. We are really fortunate to have just an unbelievably talented Senate delegation representing the city of Baltimore. Individuals who come with different perspectives, but who are thoughtful, collaborative. We communicate on an everyday basis. And I just feel so blessed. I have the honor of being able to serve in this presiding officer role. But of course I represent downtown, I represent the city, and none of this is possible without the incredible partnership of our colleagues. And, Senator Corey McCray, Senator Antonio Hayes, Mary Washington, Senator Joe Carter, and Senator Charles Sidner. I would say we have one of the strongest delegations in Annapolis. And again, I may be a little bit biased, but we just have some talented individuals that really are doing the work every day.
Amen. So Senator, the General Assembly passed a capital budget which significantly increased investments in capital projects throughout the state, many of which touch Baltimore City and specifically the Central Business District. So we've kind of done the 30,000 foot of what happened this past session. There was a ton of great things. I want to delve a little bit more into some things that may be of specific interest to our audience. Sure. So while we're going to get to the state center relocation shortly, one great example of your work in the capital budget to help secure demolition funding to ensure that the BCCC Bard Building site is green space instead of a surface parking lot, as Shelonda alluded to earlier. Can you tell us a little bit about your highlights in terms of capital investments in and around the downtown area?
Yeah, well, and on the Bard project, I think it's a good sort of a good segue of ideally, hopefully, the different creative thinking that we're going to need in this post-pandemic environment. That Bard building has been the bane of my existence for the last 6 years. It is like, to me, this representation of like all that has been so frustrating that, it's this massive building in the heart of, right next to power plant, right off the harbor, it's covered by a fence and it just looks a mess because at this point it's just been, vandalized, and it was just stuck. It was plan after plan after plan. I don't cast any dispersions or blame. It just was stuck. It wouldn't move. I wanted to try and find a way to figure out something to happen to that building for so long. And it was actually a call from you, Councilman, that noted this whole surface lot thing, which was the first time I'd heard that. And I just thought to myself, as we discussed, that this would be such a travesty if we, right in the heart down here, instead of sort of thinking differently about what our spaces and places mean to us and what they can do to revitalize and rethink, if we went to just the least common denominator and just said, well, let's just pave it over and throw some cars there and hope that it generates some cash. And I just thought we got to think differently than that. That can't be our solution. We can't go to these tried and true, this is just what we're going to figure out. And, timing is everything. And we were very fortunate that there were additional dollars available for the capital budget as a result of some of the work that the federal government was doing to send monies to states and local governments. But to his credit, I want to, really thank the governor for hearing me out and listening to it and understanding the potential there. and what would have happened if that had been ended up just as a surface lot right in the heart and soul of downtown. And fortunately, when a supplemental budget came out, there was $7.5 million so that we can demolish that. The state will own the cost. BCCC was fully on board from day one, and we can think differently about that space. And it can be a place where families can hopefully bring their kids and play, and residents who live in downtown, the more and more that are living there now every day, will have a space to be able to bring their dogs or sit and have lunch, and we can activate the area and not just park a bunch of cars there. And so I'm excited for that. That is really that's the way we're going to have to think about this post-pandemic world. But there are a bunch of other investments. We ended up somewhere in the neighborhood, I think, around $30 million for the 46th district. That includes, of course, the $7.5 million for BCCC. But we also have $16 million going to the Perkins Somerset program, which is not downtown, but is just adjacent and outside. This is a project, again, that the federal government had awarded as high potential. But we're building a brand new school and an entire mixed use, mixed income community just east of Central Avenue. And so all of these connections will ultimately matter. We've got $3 million going into the Warner Street Entertainment District. This is the corridor between the casino and the stadium. We need to have an activated, ever since the casino went in down on Warner Street, the plan from the very, very get-go was to turn that into an entertainment corridor. We've got some real potential, but we've got to make the public investments to ensure that it can be done in a viable way. And so the state will be putting up its third of the dollars to make sure that that entertainment corridor can be a reality and not just a dream. I'd say we've got $750,000 going to Port Discovery, another $1 million going to Rash Field at the Inner Harbor to really activate and renew our Inner Harbor, which is such an incredible asset to us. $1 million going to the Reginald Lewis Museum, which is one of these just absolute gems that we are so blessed to have here in the city. $2.5 million going to the USS Constellation in the Inner Harbor. This is, to prevent it from sinking, which is a legitimate issue. But these things cost money, and fixing up the USS Constellation, it's not the sexiest thing in the world. It's not a big ribbon cutting event. It's to make sure it doesn't sink. But we've got to allocate our resources and make sure that the things that draw people downtown are meeting their fullest potential. And then we have a number of neighborhood investments that we were able to secure, but I think we really had a great session overall. And other senators did a remarkable job making sure that those investments are going to continue to come. But I just really want to harp on this point that in this post-pandemic environment, Shelonda's been out front and center on this. And I know we're going to be talking state center and commercial office spaces in just a bit, but we have got to think in a new way. We've got to think differently, because if we go to the same strategies that we've had in the past, we will fail. We are at a place in time where businesses, where institutions, everyone is rethinking the world. If we do not respond by doing the same here in the city and region, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. And I think that means that we've got to think differently from the ground up. What is the role of the GBC? What is the role of EAGB? How does that interaction work together? Who is leading the charge to talk about this new vision with not just the mayor, but the county executives that surround? We are very blessed right now to have a passionate mayor and have engaged county executives in Baltimore County, in Anne Arundel County, in Howard County, in the entire region. This is a moment where we have to stop thinking, well, let's just go to the institutions that we've known and expect them to fix it. Shelonda called in the middle of session to have this conversation about State Center and the downtown and what could possibly be done. And we didn't know a clear answer, but we realized we got to act. Because if we just keep sitting and analyzing and sitting and hoping that something will get better, I promise you it will not. We've got to act, and we've got to change the systems and institutions that are in charge to make sure that there is one clear voice that can speak for what the vision ahead looks like, and that we all can rally behind it.
Thanks, Senator. So a little over a week ago, Shelonda joined you and Governor Hogan to highlight the move of state agencies into the CBD, which, as we are all aware, has been experiencing some high vacancy rates. Simply put, without your leadership, this wouldn't have happened. In negotiations, the governor made a solid commitment and backed it up with some real dollars. The move was planned before the pandemic, and you wanted to make sure that it's still going to happen. What was the governor's response when you first reached out about State Center?
Yeah, I want to give credit where credit is due. I didn't have to do a whole lot of convincing. Once we knew that the federal government and the Biden administration was going to be able to send this money down, and that our Congress would allocate these funds, one-time funds, and I think that's an important component, that these are not ongoing dollars that we can renew readily. These are going to be federal stimulus dollars to make sure that we can rebound and recover. We had a conversation in his office, and I said, look, one of the better investments that we could make is a stimulus in downtown to shift the momentum, shift the direction. There's been a lot of news of relocations and movements here and there. And it's like anything. If you have an old house and you don't take care of the roof, and you don't, fix the plumbing and don't fix the electrical, something's going to happen, and all of a sudden it's going to feel like everything is not working. But if you do one thing and you fix the roof, you start with the roof, and then you go down and you fix the leaky plumbing, and then you finally, find the extra dollars to fix the electrical, all of a sudden you can look back around and say, hey, this is the place I thought it was. What I think Shelonda convinced me of initially, along with several others, was that we had not been making the investments and purposeful efforts at making downtown our energetic core. And if you look around the globe, there is not a single city on the globe where you have a downtown core that is absolutely failing and the surrounding area and neighborhoods are thriving. It does not exist. The two are symbiotic. And I think that's an important message in a time where we know we have constrained resources, and I think equitable investments are absolutely essential. But we have to make sure that the engine that keeps things going, that creates a city, that makes a city, its core, we have to make sure that it is firing on all cylinders. There is no city that can exist where you have a downward trending core and a thriving upward neighborhood base. It just doesn't exist. And so it is essential that core is really meeting its fullest potential. And I think it's going to require us to think differently about what revitalization looks like. Things like wet lab space, things like shared office space, things that are just very different models of what we would traditionally do. The traditional economic development model is, let's go around the country, see who wants to relocate, and then we'll go find 10 floors in this building and see if we can stick them there. That's not going to work. That is not going to work in this new environment. We're going to have to see more businesses being created. We're going to have to foster entrepreneurship. We're going to have to build from within. We're going to have to attract when we can, but that cannot be our predominant strategy. We have got to think differently about what the downtown investment looks like. That said, I think it's incredibly important that public dollars can help lead the way. Public dollars will never solve this problem. We will never have enough dollars available to truly make the transformative difference that's necessary. But the public dollars, as the leaders, can stimulate that private follow-on investment. And so that's what the purpose of this $50 million was take, we have 12 agencies at State Center. We have got to figure out what's happening at State Center. It is absolutely essential. It's been mired in different plans and lawsuits and fights. There was an exciting plan. I think it's a real shame that we weren't able to move forward previously because I know there had been a lot of community efforts to look at how that project could work. But at some point, you gotta call the question and say, we got to do the best that we can. If the downtown falls apart, State Center is gone. State Center is not something that we can think about. And so it's essential that we stabilize the core and use that as the momentum to help really re-envision, rethink, and find new investments for the exciting possibility that is State Center once those buildings are demolished. And so this investment, the governor understood, getting these state agencies into the downtown will start the momentum, at least some of these agencies. Right now, there have been 2 announced. We just needed to stem the tide. And I think that's the start of the conversation. And now we need that clear vision about what we're going to do to follow on this public investment to ensure private investment is happening too.
Thank you, Senator. I've got one more question, then I'm going to jump over to Shelonda. I know we've got some questions from our audience. If you could please make sure to put those in the Q&A box. So I just want to delve a little bit more into State Center, Senator. So in addition to downtown, this move is also going to benefit state agencies and our state employees. It's going to bolster the largest business center in the region, I think as we all acknowledge. And it provides a tremendous opportunity for the Stadium Authority to re-envision the current State Center campus in Midtown in collaboration with the surrounding communities. Another thank you to Senator Hayes for passing legislation two sessions ago, which requires the Stadium Authority and the state to work with the surrounding communities on that plan. With respect to this recent announcement and the process moving forward, what does the allocation from the state cover, that $50 million? Can you walk us through a little bit of that? Is that furniture and fixtures? Is it moving expenses, renovations, and new space?
It's pretty flexible. It's flexible dollars. And that was pretty intentional because, I think, again, if we can think differently about what's feasible, then we should. And if we want to think about the possibility of high vacancy buildings that could use a state investment, maybe create a state agency hub that really builds an ecosystem of state agencies that can invest in Class A office space for our state employees. We are going to have to continue to attract and retain great state workers. And so I think office space matters. Where they go to work every day says something about what we believe in them. And so I think there's a real opportunity to use this new investment in new office space to reinvigorate a state public sector working core that will help to do the work of the people every single day. And so it is flexible money. I think it can be used for any of the various components. It could be used for refitting. It could be used for remodeling, outfitting new office space. It could, some of it, if it's not used, be used for eventual demolition dollars. This is flexible money. And so it could be used for improvements in the area. But the entire purpose of it is to use these state agencies as a stimulus to attract that private follow-on investment of other companies joining the train to invest in the downtown core. And so, we're going to be monitoring it very, very closely. It's important that it be used the right way. I believe that the governor shares the vision and understands from the beginning what the purpose of these dollars are, or what we're trying to accomplish here. And so we know the core is going to be essential, and then we're going to have as much energy figuring out what the future for State Center holds once that's a viable development project.
Thank you, Mr. President. Shelonda, back to you for questions from the audience.
Thank you. And we have quite a few coming in. So some of them I may have to just kind of combine in here. But since we were talking about State Center and sort of what's to come of the space that's out there, and you talked about, we want to reinvigorate that area if we can, understanding the neighborhoods that are impacted by the move. One of the questions is, what can MGA do to move State Center along and allow the redevelopment of public housing in an area crying out for renewal? Yeah,
look, I believe, and even though it hasn't necessarily been maybe marketed or communicated as such, that one of the biggest challenges with State Center is that you have old buildings that have to be demolished. They cannot be renovated. The buildings in which state workers are working right now are not fit for continued use. That is an enormous cost to demolish buildings of that size. And so what my sort of theory of action here is, if we start to move agencies out and we're very thoughtful about it, and we do them in a way that can start to vacate specific buildings at a time, then the state takes on the cost of demolishing those buildings. Not having someone, whoever will be the developer down the line, not have to take on the cost, that sort of fixed cost of demolition before you can put a single shovel in the ground, makes that project much more economically viable in time. There were, I think, 9 developers back in 2018 that had put in an application to do another round of development, but because of the lawsuit in place, there's been some uncertainty about it. We can move forward with agency relocation. We can move forward with demolition. That will help move a project there forward.
Which is great. Thank you. And it likens, I know you gave an update on the Bard Building, but that was in essence what was happening there. It was getting the building down so that development could happen. So thank you for that. I have 3 of our questions that talk about Harbor Place. And so every meeting that I'm in, we have an economic development committee of our board led by Terry Harrington. And when I tell you everything is inner harbor, inner harbor, inner harbor. And so part of what the ask is, in kind of summing up all of the questions here, is, is there a role for the state to play there? What additional investments do you think we could kind of combine? Understanding we know that there's the receivership process that's happening now, so don't want to push you over into some of that, but what we're getting is we need a date, we need movement. This is a hole that needs to be filled, not just for downtown, but for our city.
Look, I think every single option should be on the table. Anytime there's a picture of Baltimore, anytime there is that overview shot at a Ravens game or an Orioles game, what is the first thing they show? It's that inner harbor, it's the Harbor Place. It is whether you hate Harbor Place, whether you love Harbor Place or the inner harbor, it is our message to the world of Baltimore. We can be building on it. I know that, Visit Baltimore has done some remarkable work to try and make sure that it's not just the inner harbor that is what's shown about Baltimore, that our entire city has these incredible assets. But the reality is the inner harbor is that front and center kind of jewel of the mental picture of our city. Every option should be on the table. That includes eminent domain. I think we need to up the pressure to see activity there as soon as humanly possible. And if that requires tough and challenging conversations, if that requires tough and difficult legal processes, so be it. It has got to stop this. It is sitting on one of the most important places for the branding of our city. And something has to change. This is front and center in my mind. I think we should be willing to have and move forward with uncomfortable solutions if that's what it takes to see progress there. But somebody's got to act. You can't sit on an investment property and let it deteriorate and hope that we won't notice. We're noticing, and something's got to give.
Oh, absolutely agree. You're getting kudos and shout outs and high fives. I know we have one from Terry, says office space matters. Thank you, Senator Ferguson. Office building owners appreciate the efforts and the decision. Your decisions are making a huge difference. So thank you there. Have another question, sort of a shift a little bit, going to digital equity. And it says digital equity is also a major issue. Expansion of broadband will be a huge step forward. But what can the city and state do to assist organizations in reaching into the neighborhoods and ensure that every household has a computer and is digital literate?
So as part of the budget process, and again, negotiating between the House and the Senate and with Governor Hogan, the federal government sent the state flexible funding to backfill lost revenues and additional investments around $3.9 billion. We took about $300 million of that 3.9 to put into a brand new office of digital statewide broadband expansion that will be working on not just the fiber, which is an important part. About 150 will go towards the actual infrastructure of broadband access. That other 150 will go into the things that we know actually matter to get people connected, ensuring people that have not just access, but options that are affordable, making sure they have the equipment that they need that's at an affordable price to be able to get that equipment, to subsidize some of the modem and router changes that we know are necessary, especially for our seniors. And then also to invest in a digital navigator corps, where we will be training people up to be, learning these workforce development skills to help people have the technical and technical assistance that they need to be able to access high-speed broadband internet that's affordable and that they have options to access. So the one other piece that I do want to mention is that 45 million is going to be targeted specifically for municipal broadband. This is something that we are seeing exciting developments across the country. We've not seen as many exciting developments here in the state of Maryland. These $45 million, I hope that the city is out front and center in thinking through the possibilities of municipal broadband so that we can truly think of broadband as a utility that is accessible to everyone. And so I think the next 18 months are going to be exciting on this front. There's a lot of possibility, but we've got to kind of win the issue and work on it with a very clear plan from the city and region.
Right. Thank you. Collaboration is absolutely key. I think you can't say that enough. You said it earlier, but just to reiterate it. While we focus a lot on downtown, because this is the downtown download, we know that your efforts and a lot of what we talk about is citywide. We don't talk about all of those things, but the impacts and what happens in every part of the city is important to us, is important to all. So it is that oneness. We have a comment that thanks you for your efforts in getting funding for PSO and especially Built to Learn, which will fund significant portion of City Springs school redevelopment. They said this is a 244-acre revitalization that will spur future growth in East Baltimore. So thank you for that. Any comments?
Project. There's so much. I mean, that is a huge. That is a very. It's one of the most exciting kind of mixed use projects in the city and region at the moment. Housing, brand new school, parks. There's a lot of enormous potential. A good plan. We already have federal investment moving forward there. I think that's going to be a really important model of what inclusive economic revitalization can look like for a core part of our neighborhoods. It's a hard project. It's complex, a lot of moving pieces, but we got to get it done.
Okay, shifting back just to Harbor Place for 1 minute. I told you it's overwhelming, the timeline, but there's a direct question that asks if stimulus money on the state level could be allocated to Harbor Place to help get it out of the receivership.
It could. I don't know if that's the best use. There's some sort of free rider problem that I worry about there, sort of the economic impact of it. Look, it should be on the table. If that's what it takes, I'd like to see it get done. I just think that the fact that an investor can sit on that property and just let it be, I think we've learned some important lessons about what the future of that. There have to be some very real conditions about the use of that property moving forward, or whatever it becomes. Because I don't know if it commercial retail space is what it is the right thing there. I think there could be lots of other options. It could be a very different look for the Inner Harbor, and it could be used by a lot of different functions. And I think we're gonna have to. But we got to do it. We got to start moving. We got to get the people around the table to say, this has got to change. Because if we get out of this post-pandemic and just have kind of the dilapidated, hope something better happens, we're going to be in trouble.
No, absolutely. Going a little bit further, this one says, what is the current status of plans to replace or renovate the Circuit Court building? Do you have any updates there?
Yeah, I mean, this Maryland Stadium Authority has done a number of different studies about the courthouse buildings. There were possibilities of looking at other existing empty spaces. We had a conversation about Metro West and whether or not the Metro, whether it would have the feasibility to kind of relocate without a new rebuild. This is a hard one. It's an expensive project. I think it's somewhere in the tune of $400 to $450 million, based on what the Stadium Authority had said. Those buildings are old. It is difficult to see putting in enough money to be able to make them exist as they are and function as a 21st century judiciary. So this one's on the horizon. I would say it is not the top of the list, but it's certainly on the radar.
No, thank you. We are at 9:58. Time is flying, so I do want to give Councilman, pass it back to you to say some things. Senate President Ferguson, I cannot thank you enough. I mean, from the bottom of my heart, the community, everything. We value you. The kudos are in the chat and all of that, but thank you. And Councilman, I'm gonna pass it back to you and to give it to Senate President if he has some final words as well.
Thank you, Shelonda.
Mr. President, the senator from the 46th district, as you like to be referred to, or Bill, as many of us call you, cannot thank you enough for your leadership and for your partnership and everything that you continue to do for us. And I'm incredibly proud to call you my state senator. Just appreciate everything. Thank you. And back to you, Shelonda.
Thank you. Thank you. Senate President from the 46th, did you want to say any final words before?
Yeah, I just want to say, I want to say thank you, but I also want to say to the, I don't know how many exactly, it looks like 97 people that are on this. Look, we got one shot to do this. This is a once in 100-year moment. And there are not many times in human history where you have a pandemic. But when you do, the time following a pandemic, I mean, it is a miracle that we are talking about vaccines within a year out and being available. It is an absolute total miracle that we are able to even have this conversation. But we are going to experience a post-pandemic world very soon. And in those times in the past, they have led to enormous flourishing, rethinking of ideas and systems and institutions. That's what's ahead. And so we have got to meet the moment in this post-pandemic world to build the future that we know is possible. And so I just want to say thank you all for your commitment. Thanks for being here today. But we got a lot of work to do. So I know it's been hard. This has been a long year, but we got to buckle up and really get the work done now more than ever. And just want to say thank you, and couldn't be more hopeful than I am today.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. If there's any takeaway, it's collaboration. You are the king in getting it done, and so we appreciate that. Councilman Costello would not want to do this ride with anyone else, so thank you for your partnership on this. I see several board members, cannot name them all in here, but thank you for tuning in. I do want to shout out my board chair, Mark Wasserman, and our powerful team, Lauren, Nicole, and Mike, who hold it down for Councilman Costello and I all the time, making sure that this show goes seamless. So thank you for that. For all who are on here, and Senate President, the numbers are going down now, but people were tuned in. I know we had over 100 or so in attendance. This does live on our website. So I encourage you all, if you know somebody who needs this information, please share it. The links will be on our website. We want to continue to share this message and get it out. We do have a lot of things to give, but we have some upcoming shows. We want to get your feedback as well on what we should continue to talk about. This has to be valuable to you as well. We do have coming up, we are going to talk with CEO Donna Sawyer of the Baltimore Office of Promotion and the Arts. We're talking with her. People are asking what's happening with events, with BOPA, what's coming down the pike. We know that that's a driver and something that makes downtown. And so we look forward to talking with her next. Please, everybody, go sign up on our website for the latest news. Follow us on social, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much and have a great day.